How are we? Welcome to the show. This is the latest edition of the Superfight. So thanks to everyone that sent me messages. Actually, while we're going there, I just want to I can't remember who actually sent me this fight because this is, of course, this fight NAOYA INOUE or INOUE, however you want to pronounce it, against the legendary Aussie Jeff FENECH, the Marrickville Mauler. What I want to do is now this is brought to you by a subscriber of ours named Lachlan Matthews. So thank you to Lachlan who has suggested this fight. The rules of this is that it is a past fighter versus a present fighter. And so in this instance, the last show we did was Terence Crawford, Sugar Ray Leonard. We started with probably the number one pound for pound, arguably the number one pound for pound fighter against the past great in Sugar Ray. And I've gone for NAOYA INOUE, who's, in my opinion, the second best fighter on the planet at the moment, against our champion, Jeff FENECH. So one thing I am going to say, actually, before I get started on that, the way it works is I'm going to go through the records of each fighter, pick out some of their, obviously, the notable wins. We'll compare them against each other, and we will analyse, discuss, whatever it is. So if you've got a comment or question you want to put in there, this is something that usually I record these shows and just put out, but I really want some input as we go. So if I'm going to be recording it anyway, I want some input from you guys. So what do you think? Initial thoughts. I've got to say, at the moment, I'm going to get on Instagram and check out our poll. I put it out only a couple of hours ago, so it's probably a little bit early, but it wasn't looking good for our man Jeff FENECH. 75% at the moment think that this is 2 hours after, well, an hour, 2 hours after I put the poll up. 75% of you guys and girls out there think that he would beat Jeff FENECH. The one thing I'm going to say straight off the bat is that, look, if you're 25 and younger, I get it. You're going to probably just say there's no one probably in history that would be able to take on NAOYA INOUE, and I understand that. But if you're over 25 or 30, whatever it might be, and you've seen Jeff FENECH fight, all I ask is just look at it for what it is. And it's easy just to say, well, no one stops INOUE. He's an absolute beast. He's a machine. He's the monster, of course. So no one would have a chance against him, and that's why I've put it up. I've picked, well, Lachlan obviously has picked, in his opinion, the best guy to go up against him. There's a few others in history. Obviously, no one in today's divisions that have come anywhere near him. But that's all I ask is don't just, well, it's got to be INOUE, because if you know Jeff FENECH like I do and you followed his career over the journey, you know that he's probably a different beast than anyone than INOUE has fought in his career so far. So the way it works, as I said before, we're going to go through the records of each fighter. We'll start with INOUE, then we'll go through Jeff FENECH's resume or his record and all the achievements, pick out some of his best wins. Again, if you guys have got some comments or questions or whatever it might be, some points to make, put it in the comment section so we can, or in the chat, so we can discuss as we go. And then I'm going to give my opinion on who I think wins and why at the end of it. You guys can do the same, so let us know. So let's start with NAOYA INOUE. So we'll bring up the old webcam here. So he turned pro in 2012. You can see there with a 4th round stoppage of, is that Corazon? Omayayo. The incredible thing I sort of found going right through his record is that he won a world title in just his 6th pro fight. So this was at 108. So you can see there he had the 6th round stoppage of Adrian Hernandez. That was in Japan for the WBC World Light Flyweight title. See the supervisor there, Mauricio Suleiman, he was getting on the train there. Normally the presidents don't actually attend these sort of fights, but why not get a free trip to Japan? You can see there. So he had the win over the 11th round stoppage next. He then had the 2nd round stoppage in the fight after that. Actually, sorry, you can see there he went up. Or was it? So Superfly. So you can see he actually missed the flyweight division, which is quite surprising. He's jumped from 108 right up to 115. So with that 2nd round knockout of Omar Andres Narvaez for the WBO World Super Flyweight title. Defended it there against Walito Paredes with another 2nd round knockout. There's a lot of early round knockouts early in his career, or right through his career. He's got the Munster nickname, not by coincidence. You can see there, then he has the 12-round decision over David Carmona. Very rare for someone to go the distance against him. The 10th round stoppage, again, for that WBO Super Flyweight title. Another 6th-round knockout there. 3rd-round knockout of Ricardo Rodriguez. We'll keep going through them. Then made his first appearance in the States with that 6th-round stoppage of Antonio Neves. That was, for the WBO World Super Flyweight title. 3rd-round knockout of Yohan Aboye, we'll say there. Then steps up to bantamweight with that 1st-round knockout of Jamie McDonald. And that's probably the first time I probably really started taking note of INOUE. I know he had a lot of fans before that, but that's when I really thought that this guy is obviously definitely pound for pound. So the 1st-round stoppage there, the WBA bantamweight title. And I think this was when the Super Series or whatever it was called. Of course, Jason Maloney was in that. He lost to Emmanuel Rodriguez. He'll come up in a second here. So he had that 1st-round stoppage there. Defended it with another 1st-round knockout of Carlos Payano back in Japan. And then unified. Sorry, no, he didn't unify. Well, he did. He won the IBF title as well against Emmanuel Rodriguez with that 2nd-round knockout. It's interesting there. The WBA belt wasn't on the line, or that's what it says on BoxRec anyway. But either way, he fought Nonito Donaire for all the belts. That was in 2019, won a 12-round decision. And probably the closest he's probably come to have anyone actually test him in that fight. And then, of course, our man, Jason Maloney, stopped in 7 rounds in 2020. That was in the bubble. And then from there, it's just been a path of destruction. So he defended those titles there. You can see there a couple of times. We'll just go through his record. And then, okay, so all right. So fill me in if I'm not seeing things right there, guys. But he actually unified the whole lot against Paul Butler. So I'm just wondering along the line, if you know, put it in the chat there, where along the line he lost the WBO. Was it WBO? No, WBA, IBF. No WBC. Oh, okay. Then, so the WBC was Donaire, and then the WBO was Butler. Okay, now I get it. So he stopped him in 11th round again in Japan. So you can see he's had a lot of fights in Japan, most of them, obviously. Then probably, I think, would be, is it his biggest win? Stephen Fulton was 21-0. That was in Japan. That was a great fight. That was only last year, of course. So an 8-round demolition job of Steve Fulton. Probably could have got him out of there a little bit earlier. And then his last fight, maybe his career-defining fight, I would think. Again, another unification, this time against Marlon Tapales. Now, I think Tapales was actually quite underrated, 37-3. He's been a world champion in a couple of divisions. But I actually thought a couple of things in that fight. One is that Tapales, again, was underrated. I thought he did a really good job of beating Tapales. But also, I also saw a few chinks in the armor there. And this is probably where I think Jeff Fenech has a real opportunity against INOUE, and I'll get to the my pick a little bit later on, but didn't seem to have that same power. I know he got Fulton out of there. I get that. And Tapales is a really tough fighter. Most Filipinos are, but I just saw a little bit of impatience there. I saw him get tagged a few times. The power wasn't quite as dominant as it has been in other fights. So. Look, at this level too, by the way, every fighter is entitled to a bit of an up and down performance, and Tapales is a quality fighter, but I just didn't see the destructive fighter that we've seen in the past. But we'll get to that as we go on. Let's go to Jeff Fenech now, the Marrickville Mauler, and like INOUE, won a world title very early in his career. You can see they returned pro in 1984. Poor Bobby Williams copped it in that fight. Percy Israel, he had a lot of fights early. You can see there, Junior Thompson. So he actually fought for his first world title in 1985. So this is only, what's that? 6 months after he turned pro, if you can believe that. 5 months, actually, after he turned pro, which is just ridiculous when you think about it. Now, granted, Satoshi Shingaki, 8-1-1, was a relative novice himself. This was in the era of the IBF when they first came into the sport of boxing. Lester Ellis had won the world title a couple of months before this against One Kill You. So it was not at the level it is today, let's say, but all the same, still a world title at stake. So what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fights. So INOUE was 6 fights. Fenech was 7 fights. And as I said, winning a world title within 6 months of being a pro is still a record to this day here in Australia anyway. So this is back in the day too, where there were non-title fights. He backed it up with two non-title fights within 3 months of winning that belt, which again is just totally unheard of. Got the backup win, or the rematch win over Satoshi Shingaki. Had another non-title fight there a couple of months later, and then only literally a month later, so 4 weeks after that non-title fight against Kenny Butts, fought probably his best opposition so far in Jerome Coffey. Had a big rep, 26-0 when he came out, and then strangely enough, I'll regard as one of his best wins, but it was a non-title fight. Daniel Zaragoza, 1986, so 4 months after the Jerome Coffey fight, he beat a past and future world champion Daniel Zaragoza. A very, very underrated win, I think, in that fight. So that was in Perth. Again, back then it was a very unusual place to have a fight, by the way. I know we've got Kambosos and Lomachenko coming up over there, but back then in 1986, very unusual to have a fight there, and more importantly, being a non-title fight, which is just nuts. Then beat the Olympic gold medalist Steve McCrory only 3 months after that. I'll get through these fights pretty quick here, guys. Had another non-title fight against Tony Miller, who was actually the first fighter to go the distance with Jeff Fenech. Second fighter to go the distance with Jeff Fenech after Jerome Coffey. So poor old Tony Miller didn't win a round there. You can see by the scores there. 120, 109, 120, 107, 120, 101. Geez, Cliff Heaver, he's given 7 rounds, 10-8 to Jeff Fenech, which is just amazing. Not sure what he was thinking there. But anyway, we'll move on. Then he won the WBC Super Bantamweight title against Samart Payakurin. And this is where this weight is going to be, this fight at Super Bantam 122. And this is where I thought Jeff Fenech was probably, well, I won't say at his peak, but very, very close. Greg Richardson had a lot of raps on him. 22-2 going into that. Carlos Arate, one of the all-time greats with that technical decision there. And you can see there also, just again, the frequency in which he fought. You can see there he fought Miller, in April, backed it up a month later against Payakurin, 2 months after that against Richardson, 3 months after that against Carlos Arate, and then you can see again there with that first round knockout of Osmar Alfredo Avila at the end of 87. So he had 5 fights in 1987 as the world champion. So you have to respect that. Then, in my opinion, this is my humble little opinion on my little YouTube page here, I think his best win out of all his fights that he had in his career. Probably not the biggest name, probably not the best resume of this guy, but Victor Callejas. He was 25-1 when Jeff Fenech fought him. Was for the vacant WBC featherweight title. He actually almost lifted Jeff Fenech off the floor with a massive left uppercut in the first round. And he went on to stop him in that fight. He had a broken hand early in the fight. He was busted up, and he still got Victor Callejas out of there, who was a former world champion too, by the way, a former WBC 122-pound champion, just like Jeff Fenech was, and got him out of there in 10 rounds. Backed it up 5 months later against Tyrone Downs. He was he was really hyped up at the time. In hindsight, probably wasn't the greatest opponent, but we didn't know that at the time. He was ranked number 1 by the WBC. George Navarro, again, another very underrated fighter in my opinion. And the next 2 opponents could quite easily be at the top of the tree, apart from probably Azuma Nelson, as far as his resume, or the resumes of these guys go. Marcos Villasana, just unfortunately, the tough Mexican just came up against guys like Jeff Fenech, Azuma Nelson, couldn't win the world title belt. But he was a tough guy. Took Jeff Fenech 12 brutal rounds in 89. Jeff actually retired for a little bit after that. Came back and beat Mario Martinez, another former world champion. Had the non-title fight against John Colbin in 91, and then had probably the biggest fight of his career, which was Azuma Nelson in 1991. Now, that's probably where I'm going to draw the line, in my opinion, of peak Jeff Fenech. Now, you can see thereafter, he had plenty of fights after that, by the way, but he came back, it was only 3 months later, which is very unusual for the tune-up that was, against Miguel Angel Francis, and then, of course, got stopped in the 8th round in the Azuma Nelson rematch, and then after 15 months out of the ring, got stopped by Calvin Grove, who probably had no right to be stopped against. Calvin Grove, 43-5, hadn't really, even though he was a former world champion, by the way, a former featherweight world champion, I think it was IBF, hadn't really set the world on fire as far as being one of the elites, but in that fight, that was pretty much line drawn in the sand as far as career goes for Jeff. I know he came back and actually fought again for the world title in 1996 against Philip Holiday. You can see there was blasted out in 2 rounds. So we're going to go right back here to that first Azuma Nelson fight, and that's probably where I'm going to draw the line. So overall in his career, his record was 29-3-1. NAOYA INOUE currently sits at 26-0, 23 knockouts. So an absolute, well, monster, I suppose. Excuse the pun. So look, what I'm gonna start off with is probably, well, I've gone through the biggest wins of both of their careers, and I'm just going to go through probably the strengths and weaknesses of both of these guys. I'm going to go back to our homepage there. So look, when I look at NAOYA INOUE, so we'll start with him. His strength is obviously his power and his explosiveness. Now, this is a guy who can pretty much just sort of cruise through a round. Not that he does that very often because he's a very explosive fighter, but can cruise through the round. His opponent can have a little bit of success, maybe land a few punches, look like he's having some success in getting into the fight, and then in a way just explodes and gets them out of there. And he's done that a lot. But having said that, at lower weights. Now, I'm just going to quickly go back to his record there. Now, at this weight, which is 122, so he's only had the 2 fights and they've both been stoppages, okay. But the Fulton one was good, but again, as I said before, the Tapales one, even though Tapales is a tough guy, I've just got my doubts about his power at the weight. So even though his strength is that power, I'm just not sure that he can get a big, strong, solid 122-pound fighter like a Jeff FENECH, who probably came in to these fights probably 15 to 20 pounds heavier. So that's his power, is his strength, is NAOYA INOUE. But his weaknesses, I think, is that he tends to plant his feet, leaves himself a little bit open, launches into punches, which does leave him open. He's got away with it because I don't think his caliber of opposition has been at the absolute elite level. I know Nonito Donaire, Jason Maloney, current former world champions, wherever it might be, tested him but different ways. Jason is not a big puncher himself, so INOUE was able to unload on him. And Jason's not the fastest guy either. He's just a good all-round fighter. So Jason's style was all made for INOUE to really show his strengths. Nonito Donaire gave INOUE a really good fight in the first one. Of course, got blown out in the second one. But that's what I see with INOUE. As good as he's been, and I'm a massive fan of INOUE, the fact that he does plant his feet, can launch his punches from his hips, which again leaves him open. Chin can go in the air, and sometimes he's actually guilty of pulling out of exchanges with that chin in the air. And look, so far he's been hit a few times. I get that, but he hasn't really fought that real Jeff FENECH type of opponent, or back in the day the Azuma Nelson type of opponent, that really great or fellow all-time great fighter who can really make them pay with the deficiencies. And that's where I see with INOUE, and that's especially what I saw in his last fight with Tapales. Just the fact that if he doesn't explode and get them out of there with those explosive punches, he can get a little bit impatient. He can throw unnecessary power punches and not set them up. And also, as I said, also leave himself open to counter punches. So hasn't been exposed yet, but sometimes, when you fight fellow great fighters, and it depends on whether he gets another fellow great fighter to actually get in the ring with, that's another thing. But one thing you can say about Jeff FENECH, the opponent for this one, and just by the way, you can see there I've put this 12 rounds at the MGM Grand. Both of these fighters have had most of their fights in their home country. Really couldn't have it in Japan. Really couldn't have it in Australia. So I've put it at the in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand. I should have said that at the start. But 12 rounds, not 15 for the WBC or World 122-pound title. So Jeff FENECH, on the other hand, had those fights against the likes of Villasana, Zaragoza, Martinez, and of course Nelson. Great fighters. Now, 3 of those are obviously Mexican. The other underrated win he had also was over the late Steve McCrory, Olympic gold medalist. Now, Jeff FENECH, if you're not quite familiar with his amateur career, went to the '84 Olympics, was put out in extremely controversial fashion. The judges actually gave him the win over Red Saposki. I think he was from Czechoslovakia at the time. The jury overruled that decision, and he was put out of the quarterfinals. Or I don't think it actually was a quarterfinal. Yeah, it was the quarterfinals. So he didn't get an opportunity to fight for that gold medal. Stephen McCrory won that gold medal, and Jeff Fenech gave an opportunity very early in his career. He wanted revenge. It was billed as the Olympic revenge, and Jeff Fenech totally dominated the late Steve McCrory and stopped him in 14 rounds. And also, I'll just quickly go back to his record there early. So I'm looking at those now. As I said, I'm not really rating the Satoshi Shingakis of the world as world beaters, but again, you got to get a belt. All the greats do it. They win. They just get a belt and don't really care who it's against, and then they obviously build their career after that. But Zaragoza, in my opinion, his first big win. McCrory, as I just said. Payakaroon, that was a great knockout by Jeff. At the time, he just won the WBC belt with a knockout of another all-time great Mexican, Lupi Pintor, and was all the rage in boxing circles. Well, Jeff got him out of there in 4 rounds. Greg Richardson, okay. Carlos Arce, now at the time, a lot of people saying, well, he's over the hill and this and that. But I think he might have been 35 or 36, which is not that old, especially you look at today's standards. The really great fighters of this era have all fought well into the mid-30s. And Carlos Arce at the time, he was 66-2. So, and he gave Jeff a pretty good fight. Collegians, I mentioned before. Who else is there? Marcus Villasana and Mario Martinez, two just great fights to have at that point of his career. Tough guys. And then the Azuma Nelson draw. And I think we'll all agree after that fight with Azuma Nelson, he was never the same. So that's probably where I'm going to draw the line. So just getting back to both guys head to head. So one thing I will note straight off the bat is that Jeff Fenech at 122 was a big, strong, solid 122-pound fighter. On the other hand, NAOYA INOUE is probably more suited to that, probably bantamweight, which is 118. Jeff Fenech did obviously win his first world title at bantamweight, but I just get the feeling in this division was where he was at his peak. Featherweight, he was probably at his strongest, had probably his best fights. But I think at 122, coming up against a guy like NAOYA INOUE, I really think he would have the advantage in strength. I think he would have the advantage in work rate and fitness. We haven't really seen bar 1 or 2 times. I think you could probably say the first Nonino Donaire fight where INOUE was taken to sort of deep waters. Yes, he did come through it. But Jeff Fenech is the type of guy who would have been sitting on his chest and making him dig as deep as he possibly could. One thing about Jeff, and sorry, I didn't actually get to Jeff's strengths and weakness, by the way. I'll get to that in a sec. Well, we'll start with it now. The major strength of Jeff Fenech was his strength and his work rate at that weight. Now, when he was at 118, I think he would put on, I'm just trying to think in pounds, he might put on 15 to 20 pounds, no problem. Having said that, back in the day, you had to weigh in of the morning of the fight. So a little bit different to these days, or else he'd probably put on more. And he was able to do that very, very well. A lot of fighters, when they actually have to rehydrate after making weight the morning of the fight, would struggle. They feel they're probably a bit sluggish. You've got to be really careful with what you rehydrate yourself with, both with food and water or liquid. So, but he was able to do that no problem. At 122, again, he was always coming in big, strong, and just hard. That was his main asset. Probably his weakness, I will say, is not a lot of power. Most of his stoppages in his career were caused by or come about by simply just smothering their opponent and literally just being on the chest for whether it be 12 or 15 rounds. He was in your face. He would not take a backward step. And that was a real strength of his, because fighters, some really good skillful fighters like McCrory and Coffey and Downs and Richardson, these types of guys who are actually really, really slick boxers, just couldn't keep him off. And he literally wore them down by just work rate. And apart from, I think all of them, they were sort of stopped by the referee without being actually knocked out. So that's probably the one. It's a strength and a weakness. Strength is that work rate. Weakness is probably a lack of power. And a little bit to do with that, by the way, is the fact that he had really bad hands. In most of his fights, he would break at least one of those hands. I think it was the Villasana fight. He might have even broken both his hands. But this is the character and heart that this guy had. And this is why I give him a massive chance in a way, is because he would, again, take INOUE to places that I don't think INOUE's been before. Now, he might easily be able to handle that, but you don't know if you can handle it until you get to those deep waters. And if there's one fighter in history that's going to take you into those waters, it's our man Jeff Fenech. So I think Jeff would sit on his chest. The big danger, of course, is that power of INOUE. Now, someone like Jeff coming forward didn't move the head a hell of a lot. His basic defense was just hands up, and I'm just going to keep throwing until one of us goes down. That was the way he fought. But if you look at the way Jeff used to fight, he didn't actually get hit a lot, especially with good, clean punches. I know he got knocked out by Grove, but that was way later in his career. He actually had a really, really good chin at 118 right through to 126. And even at 130 when he fought Azuma Nelson. It's really only the second Nelson fight and then Calvin Grove, the fight after that. But up until that first Nelson fight, he had an iron chin, rock solid, and more importantly, that belief. He just had the resolve that it was either you or him that was going to get carried out the ring. That's just the mentality that he had, and that's what makes him really hard to beat. So to break it all down quickly before I give my view of the fight, is that INOUE you would see he would try and take center ring, but Jeff Fenech would also want center ring. INOUE would be looking to unleash those power shots. Jeff Fenech would be looking to get past those power shots and get in close and do his work inside, hopefully push INOUE back to the ropes. INOUE has got okay footwork, so be able to pivot off either side, which would make life a little bit hard for Jeff Fenech. So the way I think the fight would pan out, actually, I'll give you a couple of scenarios away, and then I'll give you my final one. I know I've said that a couple of times. One scenario, or the most likely scenario I see, is that it will be Jeff Fenech that would take center ring. I think INOUE would give him enough respect to know that I can't just stand in the center of the ring and try and bomb this guy out. He's too tough, he's too hard, and at this weight, he is a monster himself. Okay, so I think Fenech takes center ring. He has those hands nice and high. He tries to hunt INOUE down. I think you will see INOUE with a little bit more lateral movement. I think he would be on the outside and try and get his range. And it's a matter of whether he could actually land one on Jeff coming in, which he was susceptible to coming in. I think it was Payakaroon actually dropped him with a jab just because he was off balance and caught him in the right spot. Wasn't really a power punch, but it just showed that if you're timing right coming in, then he was vulnerable. And that's what INOUE would have to do. Time Jeff coming in and try and land that big punch. The other thing could be, of course, is that INOUE then tries to take center ring, and I don't think Jeff takes a backward step, and then you just see an all-out brawl, and that's probably where I wouldn't want to see Jeff, because I think if it's a brawl or a head-to-head lock horns type of fight, I think INOUE actually has the chance to nail Jeff. But I just think at this weight particularly, I don't think INOUE would tempt fate and try and take Jeff head on. So what I'm probably gonna be a bit controversial about this and upset the 75% of people on our Instagram poll at the moment. I think the way the fight would go, and again, take off is it Generation Z or whatever they call these days, where you've only seen INOUE, you haven't seen a lot of Jeff Fenech. I've seen obviously a lot of Jeff, and now INOUE. I think it would see Jeff Fenech take center ring. He would come in, he would be ultra tight with his defense. He wouldn't take a lot of risk, but what he would do, he would put the pressure, perceived pressure on NAOYA INOUE. He would come in, especially in those first probably 3 or 4 rounds, or maybe 5 rounds. I think you would see Jeff coming forward a lot, but not necessarily throwing his full arsenal. I think he'd be trying to wear INOUE down, take the sting out of INOUE's punches, and get close. Now, INOUE, for those first 3, 4, 5 rounds, would be dangerous with those punches, but I've just got a feeling after that, when Jeff is allowed to get on his chest, I think he would suffocate him. I really do. And once Jeff gets on your chest, if I can spit that out, there's no stepping back and giving you a breath. There's no giving you a chance to get your composure. He'll sit on your chest. Once you let him close, he's not going back. So I think, again, my opinion is that INOUE boxes long range. Jeff Fenech hunts him down from center ring. throws sparing punches for the first 4 or 5 rounds with a nice high guard, but gets in close, gradually gets closer and closer and closer until he gets on Inoue's chest. And I think he sits there for the majority of the fight. And I don't think he stops Inoue. I think he wins a 12-round decision. Remember, we're not in Japan. We're not in Australia. We're at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas where it's totally neutral. And I just think Jeff Fenech sits on his chest for that 12-round duration, wears him down. Inoue's punches have lost all their pop after 6 or 7 rounds. And I just think when Jeff takes him into those deep waters we spoke about, I'm just not sure Inoue has got enough to tread water or better yet, take Jeff into even deeper water. So that's my prediction, guys. I think Jeff Fenech wears down NAOYA Inoue. I think he has a few rocky moments early. When I say rocky, I don't mean the film. I mean nerve-wracking type of moments from Inoue. He's a very, very dangerous fighter, don't forget, early on in the fight. And that's why I think while Jeff would fight his normal style and come towards Inoue, I just think he would be ultra-conservative as far as his defense goes. Wouldn't take many unnecessary risks. But when he got close, after 5 or 6 rounds, I think you would see him gradually wear Inoue down, keep him pinned to the ropes, and do his work inside there, and gradually wear him down and win a 12-round decision. So what do you think? We haven't had many comments there. I know we normally get more views after we do this, but if you are in the chat and you want to let me know your opinion of my opinion of this fight, and more importantly your version, then put it in the chat. Andy's in the chat. How are you there, mate? I'm not sure whether you've been here for the entirety of this episode, but if you have, mate, who wins? Inoue and Fenech. And again, I'll say it once more, just please take off the Inoue rose-colored glasses. We all know he's a champion, he's a killer, and I understand that. But before you just inadvertently just say he beats Jeff Fenech, just think of what, and if you haven't seen a lot of Jeff Fenech, make sure you go back and check out his fights at 122 up to 126. And again, I think I said there, another reason why I think Jeff wins is because I'm not quite sure Inoue has that power to hurt Jeff at 122. So again, what do you guys think? If you're not watching this live and you're watching after the fact, of course, put your results down below. But that's my opinion on how this fight goes. Jeff Fenech wins the world or unifies, whatever it might be, the world super bantamweight 122-pound title at the MGM Grand in front of 15,000 people, 7,500 well, let's say 5,000 Japanese, 5,000 Aussies, and another 5,000 Americans. What do you think? All right, Asbot, we'll get your comment there. Okay, was Inoue, but your breakdown has made me think. Well, that's all I ask, Asbot. I know there'll be a lot of people that will say I'm on drugs and how there's no one that could beat Inoue, but just look at it through what it is. The weight that they're fighting at. This is not 112 or 118. This is 122, a weight that Jeff Fenech was super strong, super powerful, and super durable at. NAOYA Inoue is just gone to this weight. So, I mean, we could make an argument they fight at 118, but I just don't think Jeff was anywhere near his peak at 118. All right, we've got a couple of comments coming through, which is great. I want to hear it. For or against? Let's hear it. Geez, off the bat, that's a tough call. Fenech was definitely a beast in his prime. Yeah, he was, mate. And I think, look, sometimes there's two things that can happen. You get better over the journey. A lot of these fighters from yesteryear have gotten better over the years. But there's also the type of fighter, I think, like Jeff Fenech, that also gets just forgotten a little bit. Yeah, we all know he's an all-time great, but we just forget sometimes these type of caliber of fighters, how tough and durable. And Jeff Fenech was never super skilled, but he was super tough, super fit, and super motivated. And it would take the likes of Azuma Nelson to beat Jeff Fenech, because all those Mexicans like Martinez and Villasana and Zaragoza and Zarate and all those guys, these were all killers themselves. These are all punchers and guys that would come forward and knock guys out and or wear them down themselves. Every single one of those guys were out-gutted, out everything, I suppose, by Jeff Fenech. He took them all head on and beat them head on. And for Mexican fighters who are so renowned for the durability and power and whatever it is, Jeff Fenech outdid all of them when they went head-to-head. And that's why I'm just not sure whether INOUE, unless he lands those super powerful punches early, would have a chance of backing Jeff Fenech up and getting him out of there. I just don't think he's got the strength or power. But all right. Larry says, salute Fenech as a super interesting fighter. Is he the only Australian 4-division champion? I think it's great that the WBC rewarded him the title retroactively or retrospectively. Any story behind that? Yeah, well, there's only legitimate fighter, Larry, or only fight Australian to win 4 legitimate titles. And what I mean by that, no interim titles, no in-between titles, none of these other stuff. I think the likes of an Anthony Mundine and Danny Green, I'm not quite sure whether that was 4, but they definitely won. I think both of them might have won one legitimate full title, whatever you want to call it. But I think the other titles I won were interims or silvers or all these sorts of things. But world champions nonetheless. But I'm 100% sure that Jeff Fenech is the only legitimate 4-division champion. When I say legitimate 4-division champion, he's really only a legitimate 3-division champion. But as you said there, the WBC actually awarded him that belt. The thing is, though, Larry, the result hasn't changed. The WBC awarded him that WBC belt because they judged the fight and have awarded him the belt retrospectively as a goodwill gesture because they think he won the fight and got ripped. A little bit like they did with Ruben Hurricane Carter back in the day. They awarded him the WBC middleweight belt when he got out of jail because he was apparently ripped off when he fought for that belt as well. But it still doesn't change the result. The result's not changed on box record. The result still stands. But so that's the story behind it. So look, I still regard him as a 4-division world champion, and not just a 4-division world champion, an undefeated 4-division champion. When he won that didn't win the belt, it was a draw. When he didn't collect that fourth belt, he would have been, or if he had, he would have been the only undefeated 4-division champion in history. And I think even up to that point, I'm pretty sure it had only been Thomas Hearns that had actually won 4 belts in general. Jeff would have been the second, but the first undefeated fighter, if that makes sense. But we've had a few. I think we've had a few dual champions who've won world titles in a couple of divisions. I'm just trying to think, Larry, but Jeff is certainly the only one that's won 4. Jeff doesn't seem to get enough credit internationally. I admit I forget about his accomplishments. And that's why, as I said, Asbot, that's why I like to do these dream fights and also ask that people just think objectively. Because I know straight off the bat here, INOUE, why would you put someone against INOUE? He's just going to demolish everyone. Well, no, I don't see it that way. I saw Donaire in the first fight show massive holes in INOUE, and I saw Tapales show some holes as well. Now, not to say anyone's ever going to be able to fill those holes, but I just think just to write someone off straight away without sort of looking into it, especially a fighter like Jeff Fenech, I just think it's a bit unfair. And look, Asbot, he does get a lot of credit internationally. Of course, he's a living legend here in Australia, but over in the States, look, he is renowned. Everyone I talk to over there in the States always say, "Oh, my man, Jeff Fenech," or it's Costa Zoo, or it's Jeff Fenech. You've got to remember, he's in the International Hall of Fame. Not many Aussies are in that. He's in there, and you go over there, and everyone loves Jeff Fenech. And when you've got guys like Mike Tyson and these types of guys all just lauding Jeff Fenech, you know that you've made it. And he's so respected over there. So I don't think it's that, and especially he's renowned here. But we just tend to forget about how good some of these guys were back in the day. And I know even when Jeff was around, the same argument here in Australia was about Lionel Rose and Johnny Famechon and these types of guys. And the old timers used to say, well, they'd beat Jeff Fenech. And I used to write it off saying, no one would have beaten Jeff Fenech. But even looking at it now, through, I suppose, clear eyes, I suppose you'd call it, I'd like to look at those fights a bit more clearly. And that's why I ask everyone to look at the INOUE situation the same as that. Because I know there'll be a lot of people that'll just write this off straight away and say INOUE wins hands down. But I got my money on Jeff Fenech. Lachlan Matthews. Jeff drowns him 11th round KO. Well, thanks, Lachlan. I appreciate you saying that because you've backed me up there. And Of course, you are the one that actually suggested this fight. I knew I recognise the name there. Thanks again for this tip, Lachlan, or this suggestion. So no, that's awesome, and I agree. And look, could be a late round stoppage, but I've just got a feeling, INOUE as a champion, I just got a feeling he'd hang in there, but I'm just not sure he would go with Jeff Fenech for 12 rounds. Larry, having only seen highlights of Fenech, my knowledge is limited on him as a fighter. He seemed to hit his peak at around the late 80s. Yeah, he did. He did, Larry. Look, some of the fights I would suggest for you to watch of him is definitely the Samart Payakaroon fight. Hang on, I'll just bring his record up here so you can see. All right, so the ones, look, early on, he was still very green. And the fact that he fought Daniel Zaragoza in 1986 after only about 10 or 12 fights, I think, again, rates as one of his best wins. But if you look at that, Payakaroon win, Greg Richardson, yeah, so. The Zarate fight was tough. Definitely the Victor Kalijes fight, and definitely the Navarro fight. He was a good young fighter back in the day. And definitely the Villasana and Martinez fights. Watch those back because they are great fights by Jeff Fenech. It really just shows you what I'm getting at about how very rarely took a backward step. He didn't use a lot of lateral movement or head movement, but he always had a nice tight defense, and that's why I just think he would wear INOUE down, and especially if he didn't take any risks early. All this goes out the window if INOUE tries to take center ring and they both lock horns, and you never know what can happen. But I just think that INOUE's team would be smart enough to realise that Jeff is a super strong, tough, durable fighter with a good chin at that weight. So, and it would have a lot of weight on him by the time they got in the ring. And that's why I just think Jeff, if he backed him up, would do enough to wear INOUE down. Paul says, couldn't agree more. Lyndon, thanks, Paul. Jeff wears him down with constant body shots. Loved your analysis, and it's a perfect matchup. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate that. I did expect to get a fair bit of feedback. I'm sure that'll come later on once people watch it on YouTube after this live, by the way, because that's when most people get a bit more braver and tell me I don't know anything about boxing. But, hey, I'm a super fan of INOUE. I think he's a great fighter to win all those titles. He could have been a 5-time. What's he won? So it was light fly, light fly, super fly, bantam, and super bantam. So he's had 4 divisions. He could easily be, I think it's easy to say that he'd easily be a 5-time world champion. So I've got all the respect in the world for INOUE, but I've got a hell of a lot of respect for Jeff Fenech as well. And just styles, as I say, make fights. And Jeff was just something else at that weight back in the day. How good does the promo shot look? Jeff in his younger days was unbeatable. Yeah. Pretty hard finding some good photos of Jeff, I've got to say. You don't really see a lot out there. There's a few, but I happened to find this one. This is probably more him at bantamweight, I think. This is probably more around the mid-80s. He filled out a little bit when he got to 122, and especially at 126 is when he was a fully fledged featherweight. It's good to know that he gets his prop overseas. Yeah, he does, mate. He really does. Mutsy says, poor old Jeffrey hasn't been the same man since he was robbed. It broke his heart. It did, Mutsy. It really did. And look, I don't know if you've seen this out there. If you haven't, check out. We did this probably a year or two ago. We did when we used to do classic fights, and we did the first Fenech Nelson fight, and actually Jeff was on the telecast with us, giving his feedback and everything. And you can just tell to this day, it still haunts him. And I know he would appreciate the WBC awarding him that WBC belt, but he knows it's a token sort of gesture. I'm sure. Again, he would appreciate it and have the belt in his home and everything else. But deep down, he knows, even though he should have got the decision, he didn't, and that'll haunt him forever. Jeff's that type of guy who's just such an overachiever in everything that he does. That it would still be grating on him all these years later. And I'll still say to this day, that second fight with Azuma Nelson, that Jeff Fenech that got in there that day, give Nelson his credit, by the way. He turned up with the right mindset this time. I don't think he took Jeff lightly the first time, but probably was a little bit not at his peak mentally, or maybe even physically. But the second fight, he turned up mentally and physically 100%. Now, the Jeff Fenech that turned up in that second fight was an absolute shell of that first fight, of the Jeff Fenech that we all knew. And you could tell that straight away, and especially when he got dropped in the first round. It was like he got popped by a balloon, and then it was just a matter of time after that. And I'm surprised he even lasted 8 rounds, because it just wasn't Jeff Fenech. And if you talk to Jeff, I've talked to him many times about this fight, his preparation, and by his own admission, he himself probably didn't take it as seriously as he could, which is, I know, is it sounds weird because he's coming up against Zuma Nelson, but I think if you talk to him, he'll tell you that he got caught up in the whole razzmatazz of the event. He was a superstar here, had all the backslappers around, and probably lost his focus a little bit. And he also had bad hands as well into that fight. Not to say it would have made any difference, by the way, but he did tell me a story, to go off track a little bit here. He did tell me a story once that the doctor that used to inject his hands before he fought to take away some of the pain, the needle went in his hand and it went straight through to the other side. So that was probably the first thing. But they actually numbed his hands so much. I don't know whether he gave him a double dose or whatever happened anyway. Normally it was just to help dull the pain a little bit. Well, he put too much in or did something, not to mention went through the hand, which didn't help. But he said he couldn't feel his hands in the ring. They were dead. So that went against him as well. But I'm not saying by any stretch, by the way, guys, that he would have beaten Nelson in the fight. I'm not saying that at all. But it's interesting to hear when you talk to these guys in these fights. We see it from afar, to actually talk to them about what actually happened in these fights. And I think if you talk to him, he'll tell you that his mind wasn't focused. He was off, getting caught up in the whole thing, and probably wasn't as focused as he should have been, and paid the price. So. And he says they didn't call Jeff the Marrickville Mauler for nothing. Yeah, that's exactly right, mate. And that's the way he won his fights. He would challenge you to take him on, and he would wear you down, and he would not take a backward step. And the minute he got you on the back foot, then it was pretty much all over, because he just would not stop. And the other thing I love, even to this day, that the first Nelson fight in Las Vegas, and that last round, where I got no doubt his corner would have had to have been telling him that he was way in front, and maybe don't go for the knockout. Quote from Rocky 2, of course. But that's not Jeff's way. And to see him in that last 10 seconds, he rocks Zuma Nelson, he snaps the head back, and he just keeps punching to that final bell. And you haven't, I'm sure all you guys and girls out there have seen it, but that last 10 seconds or 15 seconds of the first fight, when he himself would think that he would have that fight won, and he still just kept punching relentlessly to the final bell and had Nelson all over the place. He was just one of a kind, was Jeff Fenech. Not, as I said before, not the most articulate, not the most skilled, but just achieved so much through sheer conditioning and willpower. Mutsy, so different opinion. That's cool, mate. What do you got there? INOUE stops him early. And I love Fenech. Yeah, well, it's always a danger, Mutsy. It's always a danger that when you fight INOUE, he's super dangerous in the first 3, 4, 5 rounds of the fight. And look, you are right that it's a possibility. I just think Jeff's game plan would be not to take any unnecessary risks early in the fight. Of course, take center ring, put the pressure on INOUE, but don't be reckless. But that possibility is always there. So, yeah, no, that's your call. Larry says, all right, Lyndon, I'll have a look at those. Those are the other fights, of course. From what I've seen, he seems to be a ferocious, fast and aggressive, accurate puncher with a hell of an inside game and great at pressuring fighters, mate. He's, in those sort of mid to late 80s, he was just something else. And the thing I will also say about Jeff Fenech, it's easy to probably point fingers at certain fighters that look great against certain caliber of fighters. Jeff Fenech fought all of his mandatories plus. He fought regularly, and he fought gun fighters all the time. As I said before, Zaragoza, Martinez, McCrory, Villasana, all these guys, Kalijes, all either past or future world champions when he fought them. And he fought every single mandatory that he had, and then just filled the gaps in with his voluntaries against these class fighters as well. So you cannot say that Jeff Fenech avoided fighters. He could have, even with the 130-pound division, could have bypassed Zuma Nelson and went an easier route. No, he wanted the real belt and went for Nelson. So I've just always had nothing but respect for Jeff, and it's probably making it pretty obvious he's probably my all-time, definitely favourite Aussie fighter of all time. Because he didn't duck anyone, took him head on and wanted the best and just flew the flag. He went over. He always had the Aussie flag, on figuratively on the chest, and always fought like a warrior, like we all thought the Aussies were, or think the Aussies were. This fight will be magical. Looking at the styles, I kind of see it as a 50-50. And Jeff's style could cause problems for INOUE, who likes picking guys apart from the outside and loves a stationary target. Mate, you hit it on the head right there. INOUE looks sensational, or more sensational. He's always looks sensational, of course, but looks better when his opponent pretty much stands in front of him, lets him fight at his length, so he has that full length of his arm to punch from, and can really fight at his own pace and distance. Jeff Fenech would never let you do that. He's on your chest right from the word go. And yes, the danger is always there, like I think it was Mutsy said before, to get caught early. But, INOUE looks great against those types of fighters. I just think Jeff, in my opinion, is by far, would be by far the best fighter that INOUE's fought. And that's why I think, what has INOUE got against these type of guys? What has he got inside that's, because he's going to be tested. Like, no one's been able to test him yet. So, look, he might be able to rise to the occasion. Obviously, we'll never know. But just in my opinion, I know I've got the Aussie hat on, by the way, but my gut feel says that Jeff Fenech wears him down and gets on top of him as the fight goes on. Jeff is definitely not a stationary target. He's going to add up pressure to INOUE, and either INOUE will set him up on the way in, or INOUE will slowly get broken down over time, how I said. Yeah, no, I agree. The thing is, said a couple of times, Jeff, he would be coming at INOUE, but he'd have the hands nice and high. And Jeff had this ability, no matter who he fought, to get close. No one could keep him off. Zuma Nelson couldn't do it. None of these, even these slick fighters he fought, McCrory, Jerome Coffey, Richardson, Tyrone Downs, all these pretty slick boxers, none of them could keep him off. And he just keep creeping up. And Jeff just had this ability to get close to no matter who he fought and be able to do his thing. I just don't think INOUE would be any different. As good as I'm not going to call INOUE. Well, yes, I will. I'm going to call him a great. You've won world titles in 4 different divisions. You're a Hall of Famer right here and now. So, yeah, I will call him great, but I just don't think INOUE's fought a fellow great like Jeff Fenech. All right, I've got a couple more comments there, and we'll call it a night. Who in that division could match Jeff's work rate? Well, nobody, because all those fighters that he fought, like the Villasanas, Martinez, Zaragoza, Kalijes, all those guys, the work rate, well, Mexicans, they always obviously have great work rates. Every single one of those guys ended up backing up and being overwhelmed by Jeff's work rate. Now, he didn't stop most of them, but who did? These are tough guys. And, excuse me, as I said earlier, Jeff didn't have a lot of power because of his hands. But every single one of them, he still had backing up. So, all right, last one here, guys. Way off topic, but Costa Tszyu and Floyd Mayweather at 140 could be a good fight. Well, that sort of goes against the past versus present, Asbot. But hey, I'm open to it. If you want to see just a out-and-out dream fight, well, what a fight that would be. We have done in the past. We did Costa Tszyu, Manny Pacquiao. We did Costa Tszyu, Oscar De La Hoya. I don't know whether we did Costa and Duran. Maybe not, but we definitely had him against, might have been Chavez, was it? No, because he fought Chavez, obviously. No, we definitely had him against Oscar and Manny. I think we had Costa Tszyu against. But that's a great fight. So we might sort of do that at 140. It's an interesting one because Floyd didn't spend a lot of time at 140, did he? If anything. Did he win a 140-pound title? Not sure. But, yeah, why not? Asbot, we'll do it. We'll put that on the agenda. But if any of you guys and girls out there have any suggestions for a past versus present fighter, dream fight as well, make sure you let us know. When you give me your opinion or your suggestion, give me the terms. Is it sorry, that's a dream fight. Yeah. Is it 12 rounds, 15 rounds? Where's the venue? What weight is it at? If need be, as in this one here, because both fighters are fought at multiple weights. Give me your terms, just so we know. Make sure you pick a venue as well, so we can get the graphics right. And, we'll do our best to break it all down. But, guys, that will do it for this episode. Really appreciate you tuning in. I know it's not necessarily the type of show that is great to sit there and watch, but it's good to get feedback. As I said earlier, I know most of the feedback comes after the recording, but yeah, if you do want to have a bit of a chat about it on the night, we're on every second week on Thursday from 7 p.m. So thanks again, and until next time, we'll catch you then. Thanks.